welcome back. And today I thought we would sit down together and take a trip down memory lane. So I've been at home a lot lately, and I was looking at my bookshelf and I thought some of these books here really influenced me a lot as a child and defined my childhood or even my whole life so far. And I thought I would just kind of sit down and chat about them today. The first book I wanted to talk about is Best Loved Bedtime Tales. I know this is probably not a childhood staple for a lot of you out there, but for me, this was the book that taught me how to read. And you might think that's odd because, even though there's some pictures, you wouldn't call this a picture book, right? That's because I don't really remember reading many picture books as a young child. When I was that young, times were pretty tight financially in our family, and so my parents actually sent me to live with my relatives in China for a couple years until I was about 3 or 4. So that was the picture book stage almost over for me, and I remember struggling a little bit linguistically because of this bilingual situation, where I remember in preschool I would get to the point where I could understand what my peers were saying in English, but I could still only speak Chinese, and there was this block and divide in my brain for a long time. So I actually didn't know how to read English. I didn't know how to read Chinese either, but I couldn't read at all until I was almost 7. So in that time leading up until I could read, my mom would pick a story or two out of this collection, because this is a collection of bite-sized stories, and she would read them to me at night. And I don't know, one day something clicked and I was able to read for myself. From then on, I just fell in love with reading, and I would read ravenously anything that was put in front of me, like I was making up for lost time almost. So that book just set me on my journey, and that's why I have to include it, because without it I wouldn't have, I probably would have learned how to read. So it's a very special place in my heart because of that, and to this day I sometimes read a few of these stories just because they're so wholesome and classic. I can definitely see myself reading these to my own kids someday. So yeah, not much else to say here, just a lot of fond childhood memories and my start in this book. So my next book is also probably not a childhood staple in a lot of people's bedrooms, but it is Questions and Answers About the Natural World. So again, I had that whole bilingual situation and started reading kind of later as a kid. So I kind of felt behind a little bit, and this was the first book that made me feel smart. I would read these questions and answers and remember the facts in here, and then I would tell them to adults in my life, and they would just be wowed by my genius, you know? Obviously, they probably weren't that impressed, but still, I definitely remember that being a great feeling. So then my parents saw me reading it over and over again, and they got me more books that were like it, about science and machines and outer space. But I think this one still has a special place in my heart for kicking off all of that. But it really did start off my love for science and biology in particular, which I carried with me throughout elementary school, all the way through high school and even college. Finally, we get to some books that you may recognize more, and that is the Percy Jackson series. Yeah, you may remember these, and I am immediately going to be a bit blasphemous and say I actually wasn't hugely into Percy Jackson as a kid. Don't get me wrong, I really like these books, so don't come for me, please. But I didn't read them when I was a young kid in elementary school. They were a little bit after that, but I'm mainly using this as a stand-in for my obsession with Greek mythology. I remember my mom would drop me off at my hometown's public library, and then I would find the Greek mythology section and just park there for like the whole afternoon. And I'm not really sure what drew me so much to Greek mythology. Maybe it was because Percy Jackson hadn't blown up yet. Because I think the first book came out when I was like 7 or so. So I was doing this when I was 8. So only the first book had been out. And maybe because not many of my peers knew what Greek mythology was, I thought I was kind of discovering this whole new world full of strange names and lore and like interconnected stories that was all to myself. Which is obviously not true, because Greek mythology is one of the more well-known and mainstream mythologies, especially now due to Percy Jackson. But at the time, I thought I was really cool and hipster for knowing what Greek mythology was. Also, it might have been partially an excuse to read the same stories over and over again, because I've always been a rereader. With Greek mythology, I could read variations on the same stories without anyone calling me out, and it was really cool just to see like the similarities and differences. And also, you know, you got Roman mythology, that's a whole spin-off too, without anyone telling me like, girl, stop reading the same stories over and over again. Last book I'm gonna mention in this video is something that I had to mention, and that is, of course, the Harry Potter series. The whole generation of kids, their childhoods were defined by this series. It's just in such a unique position because it came out one by one while we were growing up, and we grew up with it. I remember not really liking the later books when I was a young kid, because I think I was just too young to understand the themes and the issues that were grappled with. But when I went back to read this as like a teenager, I really appreciated the later books. So for example, book 5, Harry, I was really frustrated with him as a 9-year-old. I was like, why can't you just do what you need to do? Why do you need to be all sad and angry all the time? But as a 14-year-old or something, I related to Harry's angst. And then as a 20-year-old, I looked at this and I was like, dang, Harry had serious PTSD from Voldemort coming back. It just has that rereadability. Also, this one in particular, and in book 6 as well, you just see the like super cringeworthy teenage romances. It's the definition of the kind of thing that you think is like the end of your life when you're a teenager, but then you look back on it a few years later and you laugh. Like, you see yourself so much in those awkward romances. And also the premiere of the 7th book is like one of the most hype events of my childhood. I remember getting that book. It was like a giant hardcover book, and reading it the night that I got it. Just staying up until 1 a.m., which was super late, and I was not allowed to stay up that late as a kid. It just has a unique position in my mind. Like, the lore will forever be etched into my brain. I will never be able to forget it. If you asked me to participate in Jeopardy and I could pick the theme for the whole board, let it be Harry Potter. This is the only series that I would be able to still recite obscure facts from. There are definitely other series that I was super obsessed with as a kid, but I can't remember all the cats from Warriors now, or the owls from Guardians of Gahul. But like, obscure Harry Potter trivia, come at me. I got it. I still got it. So that's all I've got for now. There are a ton of books I left out. I could probably make like a multi-part series on this alone because there's so many books that I loved as a kid, so many series that I read every book of. And yeah, I would love to hear some of your childhood favorites because there's just something so fun about nostalgia trips. At least I think so. But that's all for now, and I'll see you next time. Bye!
I'm sorry.